So today we'll be working on worksheet 5.8, solving rational equations. Let's start with number 1. In order to solve an equation like this, you have to be solving for x. So just like what you would do with adding and subtracting rational expressions, first of all, you have to check if you can factor the denominator. So these are the steps that you follow. Factor the denominator. Step number 2 is try to find a common denominator. Now let's look if we can apply the first step. Can we factor the denominators? No, we cannot. So the next step is to try to find a common denominator. So you have 4, you have x, and you have 2. What's common between those? 4x. So that would be my common denominator. Now what you need to do is try to go ahead and multiply by what's missing. So the third step is to multiply by what's missing. So as you can see, you're always going to do these steps, so you're almost familiar with what to do. So let's compare 4x to 4. What do you think should multiply 4 by to get 4x? You need to multiply by x, so you multiply the top also by x. So we're going to have a 5x over here. Now compare 4x and x, the second fraction. You have to multiply this by 4. So 6 times 4 is a 24. Now what should you multiply 2 by? You have to multiply by 2x to get 4x. So you multiply the top also by 2x. Now once you're done with that, and once you have a common denominator, what you can do, number 4, is you can cancel out the denominator. You can do that because you have an equal sign. You can only do that because you have an equal sign. So the 4x cancel out. And remember, you can only do that because this is an equation. And then what's going to be left is 5x minus 24 is equal to 2x. See? It's easy. And then what do? You can subtract 5x. 2 minus 5 is negative 3x equals to negative 24. And then you divide by negative 3, you divide by negative 3, so x would be negative 24 divided by negative 3 is 8, and that would be your final solution. Now, so let's review the steps. You have to factor the denominator if you can. You have to find a common denominator. Multiply by what's missing, so all of those steps from 1 to 3 is things we used to do with rational equations, with adding and subtracting rational expressions. Now the new thing is that number 4, you can cancel out those common denominator because you have an equal sign. So you'll be left with 5x minus 24 equals to 2x. You move the x to the other side and you try to solve for x, which is 8. So in this problem, my LCD was 4x. LCD means the common denominator, the least common denominator, and as you can see, your common denominator was 4x for all of them. Now what do they mean by exclusions? The exclusions mean what are the x values that would make your fraction undefined? To find the exclusions, you should have done this as first step. So you can always start with that first, but I wanted you to see that really solving equations is not hard. It's something similar to what we've done earlier. So the exclusions are to look at the fractions. 5 over 4. There's a 4 on the bottom, so we're good. 6 over x. There's an x on the bottom. Remember, the bottom could never be equal to 0. So you have to tell me that x should be different from 0. So the denominator should always be different from 0. It cannot be 0, or then the fraction would be undefined. 1 over 2, you have a 2 as a denominator, so we're fine with that. Now let's move on. I want you to try to do number 2 on your own. It's the same concept. Now let's move on to number 3. Again, LCD means the common denominator. In this case, the denominators are different. So remember, what do? We multiply them by each other. So it's going to be 2x plus 1, 2x plus 1. Never mind, it's 2x plus 1 and x minus 2. And the other one also is going to be 2x plus 1, x minus 2. So this is number 1, is to factor the denominator, but you couldn't do that. So you move on to number 2, which is find the common denominator. So my common denominator, since they are different, is to multiply them together. So my LCD is 2x plus 1 into x minus 2. Now remember, exclusions means the bottom, you always look at the one that they gave you, should be different from 0. So you set each one to be different from 0. Or you think what the values that would make it equal to 0. So 2x plus 1 should be different from 0. It's just like equal, so you solve it the same. You subtract 1. So 2x should be different from 1, negative 1. You divide by 2. So x should be different from negative half. So the first exclusion means that negative half cannot be one of your solutions. You cannot have a negative half in the denominator, because 2 times negative half would be 1. 1 plus 1 would be 0. And you cannot have a 0 in the denominator. Now, the other exclusion is x minus 2 should be also different from 0. So you add 2. So x should be different from 2. So that is my second exclusion. So I have 2 exclusions. Again, if x is 2, 2 minus 2 is 0. And no, you cannot have a 0 in the denominator. So if you ever have a solution that is negative half or 2, you would say that this is an extraneous solution, and you would say there's no solution to your answer. Now, we went over 1 and 2, we did the common denominator. Now my third step is to what? Multiply by what's missing. Good job. So let's try to do that. Now compare this to this. So you have to multiply it by x minus 2, the top, and also compare this to this. Also you have to multiply the top by 2x plus 1. So 6x minus 12, and then 4x plus 2. There you go. Number 4 is you can cancel out the denominator since they are the same. So this would cancel out with this. So you are left with 6x minus 12 is equal to 4x plus 2. You combine like terms. You try to move them to the other side. So 2x minus 12 is equal to 2. You add 12. So 2x is equal to 14. You divide by 2. So x is equal to 7. That would be your answer. Since it's not negative half and not 2, so your answer is accepted. So that's number 3. Now let's move on to number 4. Number 1 is to factor the denominator. We don't need to do that. Number 2 is to find a common denominator. But look, they are already the same. So we don't need to multiply by what's missing because they are the same. So you can directly move on to the 4th step, which is cancel out the denominators. So the LCD in this case was x minus 3, and the exclusion is that the bottom, which is x minus 3, should be different from 0. So x should be different from 3. Keep that in mind. If you get an answer that's 3, you can directly say not accepted. Now here, we moved on to number 4, which is cancel out the denominator. So you'll be left with 3x equals 2x plus 3. Minus 2x, so x is equal to 3. But, it is the exclusion, so this we call it an extraneous solution. And you would just say that there's no solution to this question. So that's why it's important to know what the exclusions are. And they are whenever you have the bottom equals to 0. Remember, if x is 3, if you plug in 3 minus 3 would be 0, and that is not allowed. Now let's move on to number 5. As you can see, this is different from this, so a common denominator would be 2r into r minus 5. And again, the same thing over here. I want you to try 5 on your own. Number 6, if you have to, you can set it just equal to 2 over 1, and then the common denominator would be what? Think of it. So if you have a number, you can just move it as 2 over 1. Now let's move on to the back. Number 7, as you can see, number 1 you cannot factor, so you can try to find a common denominator. So 2 and into x minus 7 could be 1. Since you have an x minus 7 and a 2, you just multiply them together. And you try then to multiply by what's missing, so try to do number 7 on your own. Now I'm going to be doing number 8. I'm going to be doing number 8. So the first step always is to try to factor the denominator. Since I see an x squared over there, there's a possibility to factor. So look at them. It looks like there's an x between them. So this is a common denominator, like this is a GCF, common factor. So if you take x out, you're going to be left with x minus 4. So a common denominator could be x into x minus 4. Okay, but before we continue, so the LCD is x into x minus 4. Now let's do the exclusions. The bottom can never be equal to 0, so x minus 4 should be different from 0. It means x should be different from 4. Keep that in mind. The other exclusion is that the x on the bottom, it cannot be 0, so another exclusion is x cannot be equal to 0. Now this one is x into x minus 4, so x cannot be 0, x cannot be 4. We already mentioned that before. Now you need to multiply by what's missing. So you need to multiply this by x and this by x. So x times x is x squared plus 2x. So this is going to be x squared plus 2x. Now this one, the x, you have to multiply it by x minus 4. So you multiply the top by x minus 4. So 1 times x is x, and then minus 4. See how I kept the negative outside? And now for number 4, it's the same thing. So you just keep a 4. Now you cancel out the denominators. So you get x squared plus 2x. Now pay attention, distribute the negative. Negative x plus 4 is equal to 4. Now, since you see that this is a quadratic, it's always important to move everything to one side. So it would be x squared plus 2x minus x is an x. And if you move this to the other side, so it's going to be plus 4 minus 4 is equal to 0. Those will cancel out, so it's x squared plus x equals to 0. What you can do is that you can factor this to help you solve it. So if you factor x out, you're going to be left with x plus 1. Now when you get something like that, you said x equals to 0 and x plus 1 equals to 0. So here if you move the negative 1 to the other side, x would be equal to negative 1. So these are the two answers. Let me see which one should be the right answer. Remember, x can never be 0. So this would be not accepted. Here x cannot be 4, x cannot be 0. This is negative 1, so this is good. We're good with this one. So at the end, let's review. So whenever you get a quadratic, you don't try to solve for x. You try to move everything to one side of the equation and set it equal to 0. You try to combine like terms. So 2x minus x is x. You subtract 4 from here, so you would move everything to one side. So minus 4 would be 0. Minus 4, they would cancel out. So x squared plus x equals to 0. Now, what you can do is you can think of, some of you can do that. Like you can take x as a common factor, and then what's left of this x would be just x, and whenever you take x out, then 1 will be left. Remember, you can always FOIL. So x times x is x squared, and x times 1 is x. So that would be an acceptable answer. Now let's move on to number 9. Now number 10, I'm going to do number 9, and you go ahead and do number 10 on your own as practice. So number 9 is what I'm going to be doing right now. Always number 1 is to factor. So it could be x plus 3 into x minus 2 equals to x minus 8 and x plus 3. So two numbers that would multiply to give you negative 24 and add to give you negative 5. They are negative 8 and 3. So copy the 7x. Now, a common denominator would be something that have all of that. So then you'll take x plus 3, x minus 2, and x minus 8. And again, the other one would be x minus 8, x plus 3, and x minus 2. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing even if they are not in order. Now then multiply by what's missing. What's missing is x minus 8, so you multiply the top by x minus 8. Compare this to this. What's missing is x minus 2. Like, you try to make it the same as the bottom, so multiply it by x minus 2. Now let's distribute, so 4x times x, and then 4x times negative 8. So it would be 4x squared minus 32x. The other side, it would be 7x squared minus 14x. Then what you do is you try to cancel out the denominator because it's the same. So you would have 4x squared minus 32x is equal to 7x squared minus 14x. Subtract 4x squared. Subtract 4x squared. The reason why I'm subtracting to that side is because I want to keep the x squared positive. So 7 minus 4 is going to be 3x squared. Okay, and then so what you're going to have is 3x squared minus 14x equals to negative 32x. Remember what I told you? That every time you have an x squared, try to move everything to one side. So plus 32x plus 32x. Those will cancel out, leaving a 0 equals 3x squared. Then plus 18x. Okay. Now, as you can see, there are two terms, so common denominator would be a possibility. If you take 3x out, then x will be left plus 6. Now remember, you can always FOIL. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 6 is 18x equals to 0. Remember, you said 3x equals 0, so x equals 0. And x plus 6 equals to 0, so x equals to negative 6. Now, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to do the exclusions. Whoops, let me move this down and then move this down, down. Okay. I'm going to try to make this smaller so I can look at the exclusion part. Okay. I forgot to do the exclusion. So let's look at the bottom. And it's always easier to look at the factored bottom rather than this, so you can directly see what the exclusion should be. So x plus 3 should not be 0, so x should be different from negative 3. Remember, you can always know it's going to be the opposite. So it's always different from negative 3, different from 2, different from 8. This is the same thing, so you don't have to mention twice. So x should not be negative 3, should not be 2, and should not be 8. So opposite, so if you said this equals, look, because if negative 3 plus 3 is going to be 0, 2 minus 2 is going to be 0, 8 minus 8 is going to be 0, you cannot have a 0 in the denominator. So let's see. It cannot be negative 3, 2, or 8. We're good. We got a 0, and we got a negative 6. So both of them are accepted. Now, I hope this was helpful. Please reply to this with your questions. I will go over this again, but I will only go over the numbers that I did not do. So if you have any questions, please reply with your questions. I will try to answer them either by replying to your questions or I will answer them in class. See you on Monday.